dreams. Disco dreams. Good night, you'll be alright in your disco dreams.
Hey, get ready, this thing is happening now. 3, 2, 1, let's go. It's Friday, it's that time of the month when we get together and take the plunge into science, or maybe some art, or maybe some weird hobby close to somebody's heart. It's Nerd Night.
Get your nerd on.
In Tokyo.
Keep your shirt on.
Shugamo.
We'll make you think now.
Park Lounge.
Buy a drink now.
We're here, and it's time to begin. Pay your money to Selena. Yourself in to a chair, or maybe a sofa. Hey, is Rod lying down again? What a loafer! It's Nerd Night.
Get your nerd on.
In Tokyo.
Keep your shirt on.
Shugamo.
We'll make you think now.
Park Lounge.
Buy a drink now.
Time to sound off. It's Bruce. He books all the speakers. He's the one to talk to if you want to buy a beaker. It's Melvin, our ersatz cameraman. If you're watching on the live stream, you should be a Melvin stan. It's Coco, making sure things stay on track. When all the shit goes down, she's always got our backs. It's Selena, she's the first person you see. Everybody loves her, right? It's not just me. It's Daria, the one at the controls. She makes sure you can hear us. Do you hear us, fools? It's Andrew, he's Nerd Night Tokyo's OG. He's here to pull his hair out, and sometimes he MCs. It's Nerd Night.
Get your nerd on.
In Tokyo.
Keep your shirt on.
Shugamo.
We'll make you think now.
Park Lounge.
Buy a drink
It's
now.
Nerd Night.
Get your nerd on.
In Tokyo.
Keep your shirt on.
Shugamo.
We'll make you think now.
Park Lounge.
Buy a drink now.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
Okay, so, is this thing on? Oh, okay. All right, everybody, you can hear me on that side of the room where there's no speaker for whatever reason. Yeah, welcome to Nerd Night number 64, Giant Robots, Healthy People. Does anyone else love, like, watching those 1950s shows where they say robot instead of robots? Oh no, we're being attacked by all the robots! That's something I like. I get a kick out of that. Just me, huh? All right. Well, speaking of robots, all the music you're listening to tonight was composed by an algorithm. I did write the lyrics, but an algorithm wrote that song. It's interesting. It has difficulty with things that aren't really poppy. So trying to get a genre that's not poppy, I eventually got it to do this sort of New Orleans jazz vaudeville thing. You definitely don't want to leave the lyric writing to the algorithm. It cannot write lyrics. Musicians in the audience might feel the same about the actual music. I don't know, but to me as a non-professional musician, it sounds all right. I'm like really of two minds about this whole AI writing music thing. Like so I'm using Suno.com. Suna. I can't remember. Tuna. They won't say how they train this algo. Anyway, yeah, and I'm concerned about the future of art, but also mashups and samples are kind of a thing. You can't really, the thing is with this, you can't really just bash in a prompt and get something workable. That song you just heard for the trailer took me like 40 iterations to get something that sounded great. And you may have noticed, the robot doesn't like saying Daria's name properly. I had to really get it. And it really had trouble with Sugamo. because it smelled, I think, a lot like sugar, suga. So it would go about 50% of the time it would go sugar. Yeah, couldn't read science if I put it in all caps. It would just give me something that sounded like a robot. Actually, it really came out weird. Yeah, it's interesting though with algorithms how, because my son watches YouTube and he watches a lot of like things that are clearly just like algorithm generated voice. The singing sounds a lot better than the talking. I'm not sure why that is. It's interesting. Not always. There are a few versions where I'm like, ooh, that's not natural. Anyway, on to Nerd Nite. Nerd Nite is the local franchise of a global speaking event. If you have thoughts about algorithmic music, you can talk to me in the intermission. There are Nerd Nites all over the world, including 4 of us in Japan. Every month, we host 2 speakers who talk about their field of expertise. These can be science communication talks about art, humanities, or even weird hobbies. And this poor person who came in now missed my amazing trailer. Help us out by following us on social media, talking about us there, retweeting our toots. That sounds gross. Oh, that reminds me. I got to sign up on Blue Sky and reserve, just to lock the username in. Not to use it, don't worry, but I want to I don't want to be on another corporate platform. Yeah, so I know, but this is where I usually plug Firefox and tell everybody to use it, at least for checking your deliveries, because it's really important to keep it at 2%. But unfortunately, Mozilla has just pissed me off. Do you know about this? Yeah, anyway. Talk to me at intermission if you want to know more. But you should still do it because it's still better than, what's that? Oh, yeah. I'm not going to get into it here. We'll be here all day. Our poor first speaker is waiting for me to get through this. Let's go to the next slide. Our next event is on February 22nd. You said to tap the space. Oh, are you in the... Hold on. Hold on. Oh, no, sorry. You're somehow ended up there. Now his space bar. Jeez. This is not enough. We don't have enough hands. We need volunteers. We'll get to that in a second. This is February 22nd, also known as Nasty Valentine's Day. 21st, Nasty Valentine's Day. Right? That's just me? All right. It's Valentine's Day if you're nasty. Ryozan Park Lounge. This is here, where you go in Sugamo to get black market boner pills. By the way, if you want to speak at a future event, talk to one of our volunteers, particularly that guy in the plaid right there. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. Beakers. You can buy beakers. That's also the man you talk to if you want to buy a beaker. Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah. So they have the Nerd Nite logo printed on. They're made from lab grade glass. I say this every time. They don't have a handle, so you put something really hot in there. Don't necessarily touch it right away with your fingers. Right? The hot glass will burn you. Right. Next slide. Call for volunteers. We need all these things. I need another person to sit at the desk to push buttons in case I have to MC, because this is a pain in the ass. Or in case someone's sick tonight, that night. Yeah, talk to me if you want to do something like this. Next slide. Oh yeah, join our mailing list. Be cool. Be one of the cool people who's on our mail. Okay, I'm a little bit lost because I used to make a dick joke here. Like, oh, we only send tasteful dick pic, that kind of thing. But Bruce didn't like that, so I've stopped doing it. So you can blame him. He's the party pooper. So just hit the next. Let's go to the next slide, please. And oh no, Noel, you're ruining my whole thing. I said I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Next slide. Join. Shame on you, Noel. If you were here 4 months ago, you'll know what I'm talking about. Dick Turpin. That's from the show Dick Turpin. There, I did it. Agenda. Tonight, we bring you, once again, 2 interesting people. Renato Rivera Rusca, right over there in the fancy suit, also known as Triple R. Is that right?
It is now, yeah.
Okay, great. Who will be discussing the surprisingly deep origins and uncertain future of one of Japan's most enduring cultural institutions, Fundoshi. No, sorry, giant robots. Sorry, it's what I'm wearing. Our second speaker tonight is Crissman Loomis. He's a return speaker, and he's going to introduce his Unaging challenge, quote, for nerds who want to live longer but hate kale. Also, he notes, and I quote, I never drink wine. God, this all ends with a carriage chase, the wilds of Transylvania, doesn't it? Yikes. No one, has anyone read to the end of Dracula, the book? There's a whole chase scene and the Texan dies. Sorry, spoilers for a book that's 130 years old. All right, next slide. I'm going to introduce the first speaker, Renato Rivera Rusca. Is it Rusca? Rusca? Rusca. I should be more on the ooh and the, okay. All right, here we go. Big long bio. Originally born in Lima, Peru, Renato Rivera Rusca, Triple R! That's your robot name, man. Moved to the UK.
Or my Bollywood name.
Oh, your Bollywood name, yeah. He moved to the UK where he studied, he graduated from Japanese studies at Stirling University and is a writer, lecturer, translator, interpreter, illustrator, and enthusiast. Oh, that's it? Just those? Just the 6? Astronaut in training of Japanese popular culture. That doesn't make sense in the rest of the sentence. He's been known to stand on the platform at Takodana Baba Station and just listen to the Astro Boy song for hours. Hours, people! He currently teaches a variety of subjects such as manga culture, animation culture, subculture studies, etc., at Meiji University, Rikyo University, Okayama University, and Seijo University. Wow, and I thought I had a niche teaching job, teaching acting. Triple R, do your students want to be there? Because mine don't. Anyway, he's collaborated on a number of research projects on pop culture contents, as well as been involved in international animation co-production projects. Just a heads up, I am in the new Gundam show. Okay, that's my voice, so be gentle with Gundam.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. I'm not, I don't pilot mecha though.
The new one that came out or the new one
Yeah.
that's coming out?
No, the new one came out. The one that Requiem, yeah.
No one can keep up.
Yeah, I know, right?
So many.
I only was able to keep up because it took them like 3 years to make it. Yeah, my character's a tank pilot though. He doesn't pilot a mecha, so there's no robot involved there. Anyway, I'll stop talking and let's give it up for Triple R!
Thank you.
That should be number 4, yes. No. So, please. Yes.
Should hold. All right. Try not to move. Okay. Can I use this? All right. All right then. Are we going? Is this gainy?
No, you do your thing.
I'll do a thing. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. This is the first time I'm doing this kind of gathering. Don't really know the crowd very well, but hopefully we'll be able to smooth things out by the end of the presentation. I'll try not to go too long, but I might go a little bit long. Okay. So the title is "Where Did the Robots Go?" The other thing is too wordy, but hopefully I'll make it a little bit entertaining and interesting for everyone. How much do we know about Japanese robots? Does anyone watch robot anime? Put your hand up if you do. 2 people, 3 people. Oh, that's a number of people. Okay. So I grew up watching robot anime in Lima, Peru, as you kindly mentioned. But real Japanese robots look like this, yes? However, a lot of them started disappearing. Honda Asimo, Sony Aibo, SoftBank Pepper, which was developed by the French. You helped out, I heard earlier, actually part of the development team. Like most of these have disappeared. So a lot of my questioning comes from the seeming decline in popularity of robot anime. Like I just mentioned that there were a lot of Gundam shows, but actually it's just Gundam for the most part. So we're going to take a look at the history of Japanese, specifically giant robots, because the imagery of giant robots and robots animation, even though there are robots all over the world, this is specifically Japanese, is it not? We tend to equate Japan with, oh, giant robots. So let's go back to the beginning. Actually, the concept of the robot is over 100 years old, and Japan was somewhat involved even at the beginning. So we're going to go through this timeline here. I'll go through some points and focus on ones more than others. So initially, where did robots come from? Well, the very first work, which was RUR, called short for Rus Universal Robots, was actually a play by Karel Čapek, and he put everything in there. This is where our idea of technophobia comes from. Everything that we imagine about robots that we believe was informed by, you know, Robocop or the Terminator and AI machines coming to take over, and they're going to inherit the Earth and the future society. All of that is in this first iteration of the concept of the robot, where they are, in fact, machines that have artificial intelligence, and they function the same way as humans but don't have human rights, and then they form a revolt because they are just slaves doing only menial labor, and then they form their own community, and then they take over the Earth because humanity is decimated. All of it is in the very first instance of the work that popularized the word robot. Everything else, this is one BBC adaptation of it, but everything else is a reiteration, or not even a reiteration, like some aspects that have been built up of this, from this. So where I say Japan is involved in some way, the novel, not novel, the play itself initially came out in 1920, but as early as 1925, Nikkatsu, one of the oldest movie studios in Japan, was all set to make a live-action dramatization movie version of it. Am I moving around too much?
No, it's the mic.
Okay.
Okay, let's try that. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No problem. And words such as Jinzo Ningen or Ningen Tanku and things like that already were proliferating within the Japanese language. Everyone knows iRobot, I think. Most people probably know Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Blade Runner. Again, these are all things that informed us, Western audiences, of the oncoming robot uprising, and gave us a certain fear that something unnatural is coming and going to take over. But in Japan, really, that wasn't the case. Actually, this is not Japan. This is the Tesla Optimus unveiling from a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, am I moving around too much?
No, it's not you. It's the thing that keeps flopping back. Sorry. I'm just going to pull it way back, and I'm
Okay.
going to just... Okay, now maybe it'll stay in place. Sorry, everyone!
Okay. My head is too small, probably. Yeah. So did everyone see this unveiling of... It's actually falling off, I think.
You can hook it back up when you're here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I might have bumped it.
Hmm?
Is it too far?
I don't know.
I can't see because I got glare from the... I think I think you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so Elon Musk unveiled his own Optimus robot, and apparently it's all fully AI. Some people say this is a lie, it doesn't exist. I don't know, but I'm wary of the language that he's using. It's going to be our friend, it's going to be a worker, it's going to be our servant. And you can purchase him for however much it is, like $20,000 or something. We can't purchase this, is that this kind of trajectory did not actually occur in Japan. And even though they received the same kind of information, post-war, they went into a completely different development phase. So here is Professor Sankai Yoshiyuki sensei, and he just made a company and straight up called it Cyberdyne. But he didn't make Terminators. He looked at the population of Japan and the trends, and he said, well, you know what, I'm going to build something that is going to better society. And he made things such as the hybrid assisted limb called the Howl, which is essentially like an augmented suit, right, that allows you, if you don't have full range of motion in your limbs, to move like a regular human. His influences, again, Asimov. Again, actually, I don't have time to talk about this, but iRobot was not the original title. And also manga, and to a certain extent, anime. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Does anyone know Cyborg 009? Here are some other implementations of modern robotics in Japanese society. Everyone knows Gundam, right? And here is a giant life-size moving Gundam that was on display in Yokohama. Everyone knows Transformers, right? Here is a actual transforming car designed by Okawara Kunio, one of the in fact, the designer of the Gundam. He just said, I'm going to make a car, and I'm going to make it transform, and it exists, and it's a thing. So this is what they're actually employing their real robotic technology into. So where does this particular inspiration for this particular type of activity come from? Well, post-war, the image of robots was coupled with the sentiment that the older generations really are in general perhaps not to be more, and we have to entrust the future of society to young people, children who are pure of heart and innocent and yet have a certain sense of righteousness, which is why during this time in the States you had comic book superheroes like Superman and Batman and whatever man. But in Japan, you had Astro Boy, right? He's not a man because there are no adult role models. And he's a robot. Also, Tetsujin 28 I don't know if everyone is as familiar with it. In America, it was called Gigantor. A piloted robot by remote control, of course, but the kid, Kaneda Shotaro, is a boy. And he controls this weapon that was initially built as a weapon of war during the Second World War, which is now employed for a crime-fighting kind of job. So, 10 years later, with the proliferation of television, we now get anime, and the first TV shows that were serialized weekly animation broadcasts produced by Japanese studios were, again, Astro Boy and Gigantor, Atomu and Tetsujin. Robots. But that's not to say that immediately the robot anime genre was founded. In fact, that took almost 10 years. So what was happening in the interim? Well, there are a number of studies that have gone down, that have been conducted recently, fairly recently, 2010, I believe it's still fairly recently. There was an exhibition called The Woto to Bijutsu, Machines, Bodies, and Visual Imagination was the tagline. It toured all around the country. There we go, here are some of the things on display, Astro Boy, and what's that? What are we looking at here? Well, we'll come back to that. So there's also an ongoing, right now, exhibition called The Giant Robots, the Core of Japanese Mecha Anime. I think it just finished in Kyoto, but there's another one coming soon. It's probably coming to Tokyo at some point. And again, you can see Tetsujin here, Mazinger here, Raiden there, Gundam there, and what is that? I don't know. Oh, you know. All right, well, we'll get to that. So, the idea of giant robots then, what is it that actually fascinated young kids with giants that are made of metal? Well, it has a lot to do with what was happening in television at the time, and how it ties in to the, what we later called the Japanese economic miracle, the rapid acceleration and complexity of manufacturing and engineering that was infused into the Japanese toy industry, toys which they propagated all throughout the world. And of course, the fact that TV anime sponsorship business models evolved over time from the 60s into the 70s. So, does everyone know Jerry Anderson, the Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and the Mr. Ons, all that stuff? So, his science fiction marionette shows were based on a very, very complex and high-level craftsmanship of miniatures. Miniatures which Japan, having already had a series of kaiju movies beginning with Godzilla in 1954, were accustomed to. So they basically put the two and two together and involved giant heroes such as Daimajin, Ambassador Magma, And all of this started proliferating around 1966. This is probably the most famous one, called Ultraman. And he is a giant who fights other giant monsters. He's not a robot, of course, but the basic elements of giant robots are there. He's got a silver skin. We don't know if it's skin or if it's a suit. He's fighting in giant cities, leaving rubble behind him. Later, following year, Giant Robo. And there's a manga made by Yokoyama Mitsuteru, the same creator as Gigantor Tetsujin 28 the first instance when a TV station said, okay, we want to make a tokusatsu show. Everyone knows what tokusatsu is, right? The special effects shows. And so we want you to draw a manga based on it. So here is where we start to get the concept of a manga being made into a TV show, but the manga was always going to be made into a TV show, if you get me. From the original planning, that was the goal. And I wonder if you noticed something somewhat interesting here. The joints are different, right? So it's also the first instance where we see the adaptations of design depending on what medium it is being diffused through. So basically my point here is form follows function. And this is going to be a recurring theme. Also, following year, again, in 1968, in the UK, we get The Iron Man. Has anyone read this book? Do you know? No? No? Oh, yeah, okay. It's pretty famous. It was made into this movie many decades later, The Iron Giant, which is a legitimately really good movie. However, in the making of book, you'll notice director Brad Bird make a couple of interesting observations. He said, when they were trying to incorporate 3D and 2D elements, he said there are these amazing Japanese animators who hand drew these meticulous vehicles in space, and they're pretty accurate. Of course, by 1999, we have the knowledge that Japanese anime is full of giant robots, right? That's where he's working from. And so basically he's saying that's how our giant should look. Let's take it to that next level. But he's talking about 3D animation. In other words, he's saying those guys can animate by hand, but we have to do it 3D, because we can't. Another thing, one of the problems we had with the early designs was that the giant had lips and a tongue. I thought that looked strange, and I also didn't want the design to dictate something that was so impractical. What would the function of a tongue be for a robot? We just talked about, form follows function, right? What would the function be for a tongue? Okay, but anyone who's read The Iron Man knows that that's not a robot. It is an alien. It's a giant metal man. Yes, the characters inside the movie call him a robot because they know what robots are, and that's the closest thing they can relate to him. But wouldn't the function of a tongue for a giant metal man be the same as that for a human? I think it's perfectly justified to have teeth and tongues, especially because we have a scene in the movie where he eats. Therefore, it's the same. What would it be? It would be the same. This is why I find the incongruency of robot design in Western narratives is still not quite there compared to Japanese narratives and Japanese world building. So let's go over to Japanese robots and their design philosophy. Their design philosophy principles are informed by contemporaneous socio-cultural factors, separate from the traditional robot equals slave image that we've already discussed, and it's more closer to the hero or the extension of the self. My body is weak, I can get a stronger body while still being a child. So it's a design as a media requisite. We adapt the design depending on the media. Let's go back to the, probably shouldn't go back that far. People describe this as, oh my god, it looks like he just came out of the anime. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't. It's not the same design. Look at the servos here. Look at the motors here. Look at the design of this whole thing. Why is it different? It's different because it has been redesigned to fit a giant mechanical structure in our real world. And it's not designed to be a drawing, right? So the real design exists somewhere in between. Sorry to be jumping forward and backwards. Everyone knows about the Osaka Expo 1970. It was highly, highly influential. for lots of people, especially the younger generation. If the 1964 Olympics showed that Japan had caught up with the rest of the world, then the 1970 Osaka Expo showed that Japan was now living in the future. So the theme was progress and harmony for mankind. Displayed artifacts and culture from around the world, and also served as a showcase for Japan's cutting-edge design and technology. In the case where Japanese design follows function, we have to think about what the function is. Are we talking about the function in terms of within the narrative, what it's supposed to be, or are we talking about the function as a design in our world and how we, perhaps as a user or as a viewer, interact with it? Here I'm going to talk about a number of designers and engineers. The first one is Murakami Katsushi. Has anyone heard of Murakami Katsushi? If you've ever handled a robot toy, it's most likely his design. So he entered Bandai, which is probably the biggest toy company in Japan at this point in time. And he later left because he wanted to design appliances like refrigerators, right? And then they dragged him right back because they said, no, we got this new show, Mazinger Z. Has anyone heard of Mazinger Z? Right, so Bandai said, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to design robots, all right? And so he came up with two different products, the Jumbo Machinda, which were plastic giant-sized shampoo bottled kind of material robots that you could collect, and the other one is the Chogokin, which are made out of metal. So his idea was, since Japan was top of the game for die-cast toy cars, and they were spread all over the world, well, this is when Japan was still making stuff, right? Not just designing them. He said you could do the same for robot designs. And so he based the robot design on the concept of the die-cast car. You would have die-cast designs. And the branding would be called Chogokin. Chogokin is an actual fictional thing that exists within the world of Mazinger Z. It's the super alloy made from the element Japanium that can only be mined from the ore underneath Mount Fuji. It doesn't get more Japanese than this. And they basically named their entire toy line that continues 50 years on to this day, Chogokin. Brave Raideen didn't come immediately afterwards, but along the steps, you have a robot called Brave Raideen, and basically it was the first time where a toy company just went up to an anime studio and said, all right, we have this toy, make some story or make something up to sell this. We don't even care what you do. It's an alien, it's a giant spaceship, it doesn't matter. Just, we want this to transform into that, do it. And that begat this long-running series of toy company instigated projects of animation. Many a year were broadcast, and not just anime either. Tokusatsu shows also had to feature giant robots. They had to transform, they had to separate, they had to combine. Even when they got the rights from Marvel to make a live-action Spider-Man Tokusatsu show, they just gave him his own robot. It's not even related. His name is Leopardon. What do leopards have to do with spiders? I don't know. I guess they had it in the bag already. So we come back to Okawara Kunio, the other designer famous for Gundam and other shows. He also was an industrial designer. He was the first guy to ever be credited as mechanical designer in an anime project. Been working for 50 years, still around, still working. He just designed, I don't know if you saw this, he designed a transforming robot Mickey Mouse. Officially licensed by Disney, which is a cute, round, traditional looking Mickey Mouse that transforms into a giant robot that looks very Japanese. Google it. So basically you start to get these series that are based on toys, but the media literacy of the viewers and the sophistication of the narratives continues to develop, so that at some point you start to get divergence instead of the convergence of all these elements. Because at some point, people aren't going to be interested in playing with toys anymore. So, we all know Gundam, right? Do we know the story of Gundam? The story of Gundam is actually about because the Earth is overpopulated, future populations are going to have to live in space colonies. And what happens many years later is that they start to declare independence. So basically, it's a political thriller and a war story. I haven't mentioned any robots so far, right? Because the robots essentially are superfluous. Robots have nothing to do with the story of Gundam, and you can quote me on that. In fact, these space habitats are designed by Gerard O'Neill, who was a NASA physicist, and the director of Gundam liked them so much, he just put them straight in the show. But isn't that incongruent with the design of the Gundam, which is a multicolored robot that looks like it was made out of Lego, and like Lego is designed to be taken apart and be reconstituted into different vehicles? Yeah, I mean, there's different senses of realism here. Okay, let's go back to this. Remember this guy? This is actually the Japanese design of Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers mobile infantry powered suit, which is a real mouthful. Basically, it's what an astronaut would normally wear as a spacesuit, but if that astronaut was a soldier. So, in the second edition, this is the first edition in Japanese, in the second edition of the translation of the novel in Japan, a design agency called Studio Nue was commissioned to do all the illustrations. And they didn't just illustrate it, they, from the ground up, designed their own mobile infantry walker unit, which is not a robot per se, but it essentially functions as what giant robots became later on. And also, notice the dexterity of the manipulators is often tested by seeing whether or not it can crack an egg, or rather pick up an egg without cracking it, just the same as Elon Musk does it. And the last thing I'll say about this is that the mobile infantry powered suit, they just straight up copied it and put it as the title of Mobile Suit Gundam. Even in Japanese, Uchu no Senshi Kidou Hohei, Kidou Senshi Gundam. So Gundam is essentially just an amalgamation of everything that was super hardcore sci-fi and speculative future fiction at the time. But my point is that the robot design is incongruent with the setting and with the narrative that it's trying to tell. But as I was saying, the complexity of the narratives continued to evolve to the point where, as I said, directors and creators were given free rein as long as the robot appears in the show, and they can do whatever they wanted, which is why they made some of the greatest, most complex bromance stories that you can see were very, very popular with female viewers as well, who obviously were way outside the target market, because the target market is boys who want to buy toys. And girls were never interested in robot toys. I'm not going to talk about Shotakon, but you can Google it later. To the extent that in 1981, when they launched the Gundam movie, the theatrical version, this was what the east exit of Shinjuku Station looked like. They were expecting maybe a couple of people, maybe a couple of hundred people, but they ended up seeing 20,000 people, and it was the very first time when anime fans became visible in the public eye, because everything so far had been underground, such as the comic market events and other kind of doujinshi, sokubaikai stuff. This was the new century anime declaration. It was a major, major event. Oh, by the way, even though Gundam actually had been cancelled. Because toys didn't sell! Because kids can't follow this complex political machination story. So, basically, we end up with robot design informing pretty much everything about designing a future society. The last guy I'm going to talk about is Kawamori Shoji-san. Someone knows? Okay. So, this guy is famous for macros, of course. But he is younger than the other designers I just talked about, because he is of the first generation who grew up with anime in the 60s. He has a different set of influences. After school, he used to go car hunting. You just look at the coolest car designs. Then he used to go to department stores and look at appliance designs. Remember how Murakami Katsushi wanted to design appliances? Yes, because everything in terms of design in Japan was cool. We think that they're all boring stuff and utilitarian these days, which they probably are, but at the time, design was the selling point. And of course, he was of the generation just right to be highly impressed by the 1970 Osaka Expo, to the extent that he was, employed to head a pavilion all by himself in the new upcoming 2025 Osaka Expo. Here are some of his designs. Basically, his designs are a coalescence of everything that we have been talking about up until now into one work, which was Macross, right? Gave everything a reason to be there. Nothing is wasted. Everything exists because it has to exist. Remember how I said Gundam doesn't work? The giant robot doesn't work in the world of Gundam? Well, he came up with an idea for why a bipedal giant humanoid robot would exist. It's because the aliens that invade us are giants. Therefore, we have to get up close and personal. But in a realistic world, of course, we would employ an aircraft carrier full of fighter jets, and therefore they launch as fighter jets, but then they transform into robots, and then they fight. And he studied as an aerospace engineer at Keio University, so he knows how to design a fighter jet. And he quit Keio University because he knew that the fighter jets he designed would never actually be realized and made in the real world. So he'll just make the world that they go into. So basically, he's designing an entire world. Directorial debut at age 24. Every element in this movie, Macross Do You Remember Love, is designed to serve one another. In other words, the other elements. The direction, the music, the pacing, all of this is part of design. He calls it a unified design philosophy. And that's the real convergence. Oh, by the way, this is going to be screening in cinemas 40 years later next month. So please check it out. I don't get any commission from this, by the way. But of course, after the 80s, or rather after the mid-80s or so, we start to get this divergence that I started hinting at earlier, when people are growing out of buying toys, and therefore the marketing model has to be adapted. The business model no longer functions. If robots are requisite elements, then you have to sell robots. And if the toy companies realize that the toys aren't selling, they're just going to pull the funding. So this is what happened. In 1984, you got so many robot anime shows. Southern Cross, Giant Gore, Galleon, Elgan, blah, 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 blah. They all begin with G, which is really annoying as well. 1985, you got maybe 4. And in my view, they don't even count. None of them count. SPT Laser was cancelled. Dan Cougar, cancelled. Transformers doesn't count because it's imported. Zeta Gundam doesn't count because it's a sequel. None of the other ones are sequels. So basically, the golden age was over overnight. It was a very quick implosion. Yes, there continued to be robot shows made later on, but the heyday and the rapid development phase had waned. This is the last point I'm going to make. Kawamori, as I mentioned, had recently been tasked to head his own pavilion, and so he's been putting up YouTube videos remembering the impact of the 1970 Osaka Expo. There were many different kinds of robots being made, and the dream of the future I envisioned at that time was becoming a reality. I felt like I wouldn't have been inspired to do the work I have done today. Okay, fine. But he also realizes that the meaning of progress for humanity and harmony is different today than it was back then. Back then, it was a lot more materialistic. And today, we have everything now. We're living in that future. So what do we look forward to? Well, he has become something of an ecologist. Now, he realizes that our place is within this design system without getting too religious. I think he's spiritual, but I don't think he's actually religious. So he believes that we play a part in a unified system of nature, as it were. And so we have to be aware of that, and we have to be aware of the future what it may bring, and how we can make it sustainable again. So he designed his own pavilion to make the visitor feel acutely aware that they were a part of a living Earth. And he basically said, this is what it's planned to look like. I don't know if they finished. They did go over budget. There were some news stories, and they had to cut down. But he sees it as his calling for giving back to the Osaka Expo that inspired him and allowed him to make all these creations. And I'll end with this thing, which is basically what I just described. Basically, it was all in the 1970s. It was all about growth. It was all about development. But now, you know, we're past that point of desire, and we have to figure out how we're going to live in a sustainable environment. So basically, those were all my points today. It's not really that bright future of giant robots, but I think that our harmonizing with technology is something that is still at the forefront of Japanese design philosophy today, which is very, very different to whatever Elon Musk is bringing to the table. I am actually genuinely interested in seeing what he comes up with, but doesn't. Oh, so yes. Make it this way. Make it that way. Yeah. Well, that's the idea, basically. I do have other slides if time allows, but I guess I'll open it up to questions at this point.
We better do Q&A.
These are the references.
Okay,
And if you want to read
one.
more, I wrote some stuff in some books.
Share references afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
awesome. This is so. We're gonna have a shorter.
Thank you. very
Yep. Clap, please. You'll get a chance to do it again. We'll have a reasonably short Q&A because that 10 minutes. Okay. Bruce, you gonna help me with the other mic? We got a question right behind you, right there. Yeah. So don't forget to mute us when we're not talking. Push the button on the bottom and hold it down. On the bottom.
Thank you.
So it's a very interesting, like, there's a philosophical questions here, at least for me.
Yes.
So do you know which one comes first? Is it like Godzilla and the kaiju first, or the giant robots first? And I know the question seems ridiculous, but I think there's a philosophical element into it, because there are a lot of people that argue that Godzilla and the kaiju is embodiments of the fat man and the little boy.
Yes.
The two nukes that was dropped
Of course,
here.
yes.
And if we take that arguments and agree with it, then we can see that these giant robots as an antithesis to it. So it is something that is truly Japanese. It is heroic as well.
Yes.
So it saved the Japanese society from this kaiju. And so yeah, and also the story fits. After the destructions by this Godzilla, the giant robots saved the Japan economy, but through manufacturing and high tech, deep tech, what do you call it? Very precise engineering.
Yes.
And then afterwards, around the 1985 and 1990s, the bubble burst, and
Yes.
and therefore the giant robots gone as well. So it's actually quite fit. This story is just perfect for me. Like, that's basically what I got from your presentation. So.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, the point about Godzilla, I think is very interesting because, yeah, I always saw it as a kind of a natural revenge story. You know, it's like we used nuclear power in the wrong way, and now the Earth has made this thing to chastise us, as it were. And I find it interesting that you think of it of robots as the antithesis of that. I understand, but I also I would frame it differently because the giant robot, I think, represents a reappropriation of technology that could bring us to war and destruction, but if used in a more responsible way, or at least a more morally correct way, I guess, then it could lead us to prosperity. And so I think it complements that. I know that you know, in the actual movies we see robots fight monsters, but I don't think it's I don't really need to take the metaphor that far. I think that they do complement each other very well, especially because that follows the latter half of what you said, which is that giant robots are essentially retroactively functioned as an allegory of Japan's bubble and then the later bursting of the bubble. So thank you for your comment. Anybody else want to?
Thank you very much for the talk.
Thank
It's
you.
great. I was just wondering where you think the genre might go in the future. So, like, because you had people in machines,
Yes.
and then in '95 you have like people in androids, and like Evangelion or something. Then 2015 you had
Okay.
people in people, and like Attack on Titan. So
Okay.
I'm like 2035. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I hesitated or refused to call robot anime a genre. The reason for that is, well, I'll ask a question. Back to the Future. Everyone loves Back to the Future, right? What's the genre of that movie? Action, adventure. So that's a lot of words. So if you were working at Blockbuster Video in the 90s, where would you put it? Would you put it in sci-fi or would you put it in comedy? I'm not saying that this is correct, but I looked for it in science fiction when I was a kid, and I found it in comedy. And I was like, why is this in here? And then I watched it, and I was like, oh, okay. So my point is that giant robot anime can be any genre, whether it is suspense or horror or speculative fiction or comedy or whatever. So I think it's just an attribute of anime, and what you're describing is basically trends, right? So I don't think it will pick up as a trend unless there's a reason for us to somehow revitalize the robot, whether it is in the form of toys or whatever, revitalize robots as merchandising. Because nothing in anime functions without its ancillary merchandising elements. So it's a bit of a cynical question, but it's basically like, if you look at it from the perspective of a producer, well, what are the trends going to be depends on what the products that are going to be popular in the next 10 years going to be. But as far as the robot anime being a genre, I don't really subscribe to that idea. Not to say anything negative. People can think the way they want, but I think, yeah, I don't know. It's like the time machine in Back to the Future is the only sci-fi element in that movie, and it's only there to have the function of this comedic situation that arises, right? That you don't actually get along with, that your father was a geek or whatever it was, or I fell in love with my mother, or my mother fell in love with me, whatever that story was. That's why they got rejected 5 years before they got a studio to fund them. Anyway, that's a different movie. Anything else? Thank you very much for your question. You had a question, right? Oh, sorry.
Thank you for your interesting talk.
Yes.
So I was checking, like, you said, like, from 1984, like, there were like a long list of anime just starting with G, and in 1985, like, you have nothing almost. Like, I think
Almost.
like that.
It's
yeah,
an exaggeration, though.
Yeah, like-
and I'll explain why in a second, but please.
yeah, but like that also kind of like coincides with the time that like the Famicom was introduced to the Japanese
Oh
market.
yeah, of course, yes. I didn't have. I mean, I've only got limited time, and I went right over that
Okay.
time. But I did want to talk about robots in games as well, because that's basically where they went to. My talk was mostly limited to their appearance on TV, which was the most mainstream thing, right? People watched anime on TV during dinner time because that's when it was on. It's not on now because nobody would sponsor it at that golden time anymore. But that's the way that people watched anime, right? So you were having dinner and there were giant robots on television. But after 1985, as you said, the Famicom, and then into the 90s, as you mentioned, everything gets very compartmentalized and diversified into everyone's own hobbies and interests. So the gamers went over to the game side, and the the Bishoujo fans went over to watch Evangelion, right?
Yeah, and also like quite of interesting. Like it's like a boom and bust cycle, because I think in the in early '90s or late '90s, like Power Rangers started coming live
Yes,
action.
Yes, but those were reappropriated older shows from Japan. So the first couple of seasons of Power Rangers, I believe, were like from the 80s, even though they aired in the 90s, because they used all the action footage from the old Japanese shows. That's why it's so grainy. And then the new sequences, I don't know if you grew up watching Power Rangers, when they took off their helmets, you know, it's a white guy. And what is it, like the Black Ranger was a black guy, and the Yellow Ranger was an Asian lady, and it was so weird. I don't think that would fly today, but they're still making them, so I don't know. But yeah, so it was. I think we get into different territory when we look at the American interpretations of these shows, and they started to make giant robot animated shows on Cartoon Network and stuff like that for a while, but none of them really took off. And there was one more thing that I was going to say, but I forgot, so it doesn't matter. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, is it? He had his hand up like from the beginning, so that can be the last one, maybe.
All right.
Thank
So thank you very much for the talk, and thank you very much for the time. I was wondering though, is it possible that because on the beginning of your presentation you mentioned about different interpretations of robots in Western, or I will say European American culture and
Right.
Japanese culture?
Right.
Is it a possibility that this happens because the first robots are a metaphor of slavery, of serfdom in Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia?
Czechoslovakia, yeah.
While in Japan, the first idea of machinery came from karakuri
Ningyo, right,
which is actually a thing that is made to entertain people and to show the craftsmanship of people who made those. Would you agree to that? And could you please, if you have any comment on that?
Yes. Again, I really wanted to include karakuri Ningyo in this talk, but I decided to begin with the definition of robot, and that's why I began with the Czechoslovakian play. Yes, this is why you should have Matt Alt on this on this Nite Tokyo, because sorry.
Tell him to come.
Okay. Yeah, he lives. But at the end of the day, they're trying to make all these complicated systems for fun, right? And it all, in many ways, was a utopian society, right? They had all these systems very much in place, and so toy manufacturing, the first thing that they manufactured and exported were toys. All of that is in service of the idea of asobi, right? And them completely taking over the international video game market with the Famicom, which wasn't even really that powerful. Space Invaders, was the other really big one. Pac-Man. All of this, in spite of all their limitations, is in the service of play. So yes, absolutely. Giant robots were probably spearheaded by not the fact that they were robots, but the fact that they were cool toys. And the media was always just something that was an afterthought as far as the designers were concerned. Or rather, let's say, the people at the toy companies were concerned. So yes, absolutely. Karakuri Ningyo is, I would say, the origins of what eventually came to be known as Japanese robots, right? Automated playing dolls. I'm speaking into this thing the whole time, but it's not a microphone. I know that. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Yes. And I'm glad you asked me, because then it gave me an excuse to mention it. Otherwise it wouldn't fit. Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, take this off now.
I seem to don't have a mic, so people at home aren't going to know what the hell's going on right now. But yeah,
You can borrow mine. I don't want mine anymore.
we're going to take. It doesn't like you either, apparently.
Yes, I know.
We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with the next speaker, who's over there sitting in that chair.
your midnight driving and put your dancing shoes away. A little woman, little man, little grown up, little platform wearing disco fan. It's time to stop your late night shaking. It's the end of a long dancing day. This is a disco. This is a disco lullaby. Lay down your funky head. It's time to go to sleep now. Go get tucked into bed. Your daddy and your mommy will boogie shake their bummies at the disco scene. But first they'll tuck you into bed and you'll disco in your dreams. Disco dreams. Oh, little boy, little girl, little person, little jumpsuit wearing sequins. Well, it's time to stop your midnight jiving and put your dancing shoes away. A little woman, little man, little grown up, little platform wearing disco fan. It's time to stop your late night shaking. It's the end of a long dancing day. This is a disco. This is a disco lullaby. Lay down your funky head. It's time to go to sleep now. Go get tucked into bed. Your daddy and your mommy will boogie shake their bummies at the disco scene. But first they'll tuck you into bed and you'll disco in your dreams. Disco dreams.
All right. All right, all right, all right. All right, we're coming back. All right, Bruce, hit the space bar, would you? And the music should turn off. Have we sold out on the beakers yet? We got one beaker left. If you want to make someone happy for Christmas, I know that there's nothing like the gift of a beaker, a Nerd Nite branded beaker. You can, you can buy one of those. All right, next slide, please. Dun, dun, dun. All right, hey, you know this place, hey, settle down out there. This place we're in right now is Ryozan Park Lounge. This is also the venue of Tokyo Humanities Cafe, where the humans gather and talk about humanities. I don't know when their next event is. I don't know what it is. Is there a humanities person here tonight? Any? No? Okay. But you know what? You can check them out because I put the QR code down there, and if you scan that with your phone before I go to the next slide, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Oh, he's scanning, so I got to wait for him now. I shouldn't have said that. You can find out when their next event is, and I'm sure it's going to be a good one. But we do know, next slide, please. Whoa! We do know when Space Cafe's next event is. It's on January. What are you doing? Don't go to the next slide yet. But that went automatically? That's weird. All right. Anyway, okay, now hold on. I got to do this myself. Oh, no, you got it. Nice. Okay, yeah, you might have to. So Space Cafe, they talk about space stuff. You guys don't know what you're talking about yet, do you?
I don't, but one of the other people do.
One of the other, but they're not here, are they?
No.
Okay, space stuff. They're going to talk about space stuff, and that is January 16th. And we're on the next slide again. It's January 16th. It is at Good Heavens Pub in Shimokitazawa. If anybody knows where that is. Either of those things. It's pretty good. It's nice. All right. Nerd Nite is, why am I not looking at my notes so I actually know what I'm going to say? Helps if I would have my actual phone. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. 5-minute warning. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so Nerd Nite Tokyo is produced by the Yokohama Theater Group, also known as YTG. YTG is a registered nonprofit and is the beneficiary of any net income Nerd Nite is able to produce. What are we working on at YTG? Well, I just actually went on a studio visit today to visit the artist who is guiding our next show. It is this really weird, multi-dimensional, weird show. I can't even explain it. It's so people living in 2 dimensions, and there's immortals, and it's going to be weird. The art, it's like there's weird art, and I will have pictures for you probably by the next time we see you in February, because at that point we'll be 2 months into rehearsals. I'm also working on an audio project set in the late 1960s in Tokyo, about when the Beatles came to Tokyo and a boomer who wanted to go see them. That's going to be released for free as a podcast. Donations to YTG and also just being here at Nerd Nite and paying your entrance fee supports this company in making those projects I just talked about and others. So, yeah, thanks for that. Let's go on to the next slide, and I can introduce... Oh, yeah, if you do want to donate, you can use that QR code. I don't see anyone pulling out their phones. I don't see anyone pulling out their phones. Okay, I'm not going to be a jerk about it. Next slide. I hate this self-promo stuff. I'd rather just, stand up here and make jokes about robots. Right, next up. Emaciated John Cena. Crissman Loomis. Crissman is a mathematician by training and a body hacker at heart. That sounds like something out of some 90s movie. He loves diving into new topics, reading the latest studies, and testing them on himself. Isn't that like the origin story of half a dozen Spider-Man villains? Green Goblin, the Lizard, Dr. Octopus. Is that someone want to throw me? There's got to be more, right? The Rhino, no, the Rhino is just an idiot. Sandman was an accident. But there's some others, I'm sure. Anyway, he's done all kinds of experimenting. And we're not just talking about weird sex stuff at college. From experimenting with a year of veganism to gaining 9 kilograms of muscle in just 2 months. Is it still on? Some of it, okay. He's always exploring new ways to optimize health and performance. Anyway, I better let him come up here and do his talk before he bursts out of his shirt Bruce Lee style. So, big hand for Crissman Loomis. I don't know why I keep saying your name wrong. I'm sorry.
I can.
There we go. Got it. Brilliant.
Okay, we can hear me? Oh, I can hear me, so good. Okay. So I'm, as introduced, I'm a researcher in health and longevity. And tonight I'll be talking about, as I click through the blank screens, the tiers of longevity interventions. So I've been doing study for a long time, trying to find out what it is that really makes a difference in our lives, things that we can do that will help us to live healthier and longer. So in doing that, I've come up with actual tiers to say these are the things that will give you the most benefit. And my hope is that by listening to my talk tonight, you'll have a better understanding of what are the things that you could change in your habits or diet that would make a material difference in how healthy and how long you live. So also, I've been trying to put this together into an Unaging challenge, which will be starting in January 6th of next year, and I'll talk more about that later as well. So the last time that I was here, I had just run a marathon. And here you can behold the joy and glory, the sheer pleasure of running a marathon. So I was very happy. I was able to run it in 3 hours and 26 minutes. Thank you. My first and maybe last marathon. But basically I had gone through all the training and trying to do the research to find how to do that in the best time possible. And afterwards, I've been doing the health research for a while. One of my friends said, I'm really impressed that you're able to do that just for your first marathon ever. I need help getting able to walk upstairs without being out of breath. I want you to come up with an exercise program for me. So I'm like, okay, well, I have been doing the research. So then I started to think of, okay, well, what would I put into it? What's the critical components that I would teach someone to say, okay, give me a plan from the beginning? And it actually changed the way I think of it, because it's easy to say these are all good things, and then they give kind of a list of things. When you say, no, this person has this much time to exercise, what should they do with that time? So as I look through that, the first thing that I started to do is come up with basically what are the biggest payoffs? What do you get the most benefit for in terms of longevity? And so then I came up with data. So I'll get more into this. This is basically the summary, and I'll be going into this. You don't have to photograph this or anything. I'll go into more detail in each section. But these are then all the interventions that you could do with your life and how much life you would get for each of them. Okay? So let me go into, before I go into, we got the S tier, A tier, A, B, C, D, and neutral. And let me tell you about the process, because one of the things I've been asked is, okay, well, this sounds great. What study is this from? This is from more than one study. So for each of these things, and at the very top here, I'll use a later pointer here, for walking, which is the S tier, the first thing I do is I go to Google Scholar, and I say, okay, well, tell me about walking and all-cause mortality. If I walk, how much longer will I live? And unfortunately, generally you can't get a good answer for this. Even if I go to ChatGPT and ask it in that way, it won't tell me. So instead what I'll get is I'll get just studies like this, the association of daily step count and mortality among US adults. So I'll go through all these studies and try and see, okay, well, what's the numbers behind it though? Because this still is not telling me how much longer I'm going to live. And so then as I go through the study, eventually I'll find something that'll tell me what the hazard ratio is for all-cause mortality. Right? So if you walk 12,000 steps a day, your hazard ratio for dying will go down from 100% to 0.35. So it's a 65% reduction in your chance of dying. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean you're going to live 65% longer. It's not the way the math works. So what it's saying is that if you had, say, a 1% chance of dying for your age and gender that year, but you walked 12,000 steps every day, then instead of having a 1% chance of dying, you would have a 0.35% chance of dying that particular year. Right? And you can run that all the way out. But again, this is not telling me, well, how much time do I get out of this? So then I would take that information then, and I would put that into an actuarial table. So this is the table then that tells you for every year of your life, and this is based off of the United States, so the SSA.gov website tells you what your chance of dying is every year. And so then I apply the hazard ratio to this, and then do, okay, did you die this year? Yes, no. And then, okay, here, then that was your average life. And then next year, and then take it instead of 1% chance of dying, 0.35% chance of dying next year, and you can get an expected lifespan. All clear, right? Okay, we'll have questions later. So then with each of these then, I go through each of the interventions and say, okay, once I've tracked it down to a hazard ratio, how much more life is it going to give me? And so then we can come up with a table like this. So here's the basis behind, if you have a hazard ratio, this will then tell you basically how much more years of life you could get from this. And the years of life here are, as a benchmark, I've used a 40-year-old male. And if you're older than that, you're not going to get quite as much time. If you're younger than that, you'll get more time. If you're a woman, you'll get a little less time because you live longer. So it all comes through, but then now I can take a look at, say, okay, if this gives, say, a 12% decrease in mortality, then that means I'm going to get about another year of life out of it. Right? So now I can convert from having a hazard ratio for mortality, premature death, and convert that into something that will tell me how much more extra life on average. There are no guarantees here. I still have to walk out into the street after this is over and ride trains and other things. But on average, how much longer I could expect to live or hope to live. So then going through all the interventions then, I go into each of them and say, okay, well, let's take a look and see how that affects things. Right? So if I look at, say, walking, which is the S-tier intervention, this is 7 extra years of life from the 65% reduction in all-cause mortality. It's huge. Like this is like number one, and if you read Brian Johnson or Peter Attia or the other experts, they don't even talk about walking because it doesn't show up in any of your biomarkers or anything. Like you just live longer and healthier. You sleep better. Maybe you lose some weight, like not Ozempic weight, but maybe you lose some weight. And you have a better life for it, but you won't notice that in your cholesterol or other things, maybe a little bit in the blood pressure. But they just find that the people who do this live another 7 years. So this is the S tier, the number one intervention, walking 12,000 steps a day. Then after that, we get to something which is, I think of the A tier as being the active tier, because these are generally the physical activities that give you the most reward for your effort. So here we have things like aerobic exercise, basically jogging or riding your bicycle or something. Strength training also comes here. You get an extension for life for that. And then also we have high intensity interval training. So if you looked at exercise before, this is where you do 100% effort. You try to get your heart rate to 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate. And then you rest and run a little slower for a while, and then you run back again at your maximum heart rate. And this then on top of doing the aerobic exercise of doing a jog, if you combine these two of them together, then it gives you another like 4 years of life. It's amazing. It has other benefits to it as well, but just in the straight life, this is enough to justify it. Now, some other things on here that are a little different is sauna is one of them. It's a very common habit in Finland. Not so much back in America, but I find I can go down to my local bath here in Japan and get a good sauna. But it has really strong benefits that are it's about a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. And then one other thing, if you look at walking, you'll notice that there's the green part here, which is the benefits you can get, and then there's a gray part over here to the left. And this is basically where the average person is. So when I say 12,000 steps, the average person is already walking 3 to 4,000 steps. Is pretty normal, assuming you're not staying in bed all day long, every day. You're getting at least probably 3,000 or 4,000 steps or so. So for each of these, I say if I were to recommend this, how much would the average person get for it? But of course, we're all special, and none of us are average here. So if you're not walking at all, then you might get more benefit out of them or less. But also the red items are things that are to be avoided. So smoking is, no fast breaking news here, is one of the most dangerous things you can do. And this is the average person across everyone, but of course you're either smoking or you're not. So if you're smoking, you'll get the whole benefit of this bar, and it's as valuable as walking. So then we got down to the next tier, which is the B tier interventions, and I think of this as the basics. And there are some things on here that I think are quite surprising. One, and I was super happy to find this because I like coffee quite a bit, is that drip coffee is one of the top ones in the basic tier. It's very healthy for you. And this is one of the areas where you can do either of these things. You can either drink drip coffee or black or green tea, because half of the benefit is from the caffeine. You won't get double this if you do both. But half of the benefit appears to be from the caffeine, because they can tell this because they have very good studies in the UK about drinking coffee and tea. And they tell you that basically if you drink decaffeinated coffee, you only get half of that bar, and we'll get to that in the lower tiers. And on the flip side of it, the other half of it appears to be some of the chemicals inside of it. And if you drink instant coffee, you get the other half, but you get the caffeine part, but not the chemical part. And if you're drinking instant decaffeinated coffee, I don't know what you're doing here. So then the next side of it is we get into the things that are basically the whole grains, and then nuts and olive oil, glucosamine. I'll say something about that in a fish. So the whole grains is actually one of the best sources of fiber in your diet. Oftentimes when you say you should have more fiber in your diet, it's healthy, people think that's fruits and vegetables. But actually, for calorie consumption, whole grains is the best source of this. And these are things that are sometimes unfairly impugned as not as healthy, like a granola bar or ultra-processed cereal like Cheerios. Counts. Good. I ate a lot of those as a kid. Whole nut, grape nuts, or other things. Unfortunately, rice doesn't count. Sorry, it's a little bit over-refined. Even if you're getting the wild rice and stuff, it just doesn't have as much fiber as like a whole fiber or a whole wheat pasta or a whole bread. Then the most efficient thing, and I think I might have talked about this before in my last talk, is actually nuts and olive oil. This appears to be the monounsaturated fats because there's not much other shared between nuts and olive oils, but they both have the same profile of a huge benefit for a small dose. So we're talking about like a very small handful, like 20 grams, like less than an ounce of nuts a day, gives a 17% reduction in all-cause mortality. Like just that. But the punchline of it is if you eat 2 handfuls, you don't get 34%, you still just get the 17%. It's flat. Like it has this really strong peak. Yeah, you totally should have done that, and now it's just empty calories. Like that's all you get. And olive oil has the same profile. And there's one thing in common between olive oil and nuts, and that is the monounsaturated fats. So I'm guessing, like I think avocados would also fall in this thing, but I don't have the observational studies for that because it's kind of more recent. Then as we continue down the list and talk about glucosamine, this is it's a joint medicine. It's a supplement, the only supplement to make the list, because we actually have a lot of data on people just taking it for their knees. And we have enough of that we can say from the observational data that actually it does reduce all-cause mortality, premature death, by about 10%. And then the last one here, very popular here in Japan, is fish. The only meat to be on the positive side is, well, actually, we'll get to legumes later, but the only meat that's positive. And up to 200 grams a day is, we found people who eat that, and that has quite a significant benefit for lengthening your life. So then as we get beyond the basics, we go to the C tier, and these are the cautions, right? These are the things, yeah, maybe you shouldn't eat that. And by the way, I just want to be clear, I eat all these things. So it's all about the dosage and how often you eat them. But here we have things like processed meat, sugary beverages, and red meat, and also eggs. Processed meat is any kind of processed meat. It's hams, salami, deli turkey, where you get it kind of in the thing, or pepperoni. Sugary beverages, and this is a fun one. I oftentimes am asked, as someone who's researching longevity and trying to live as long as I can, I like cookies just as much as the next person. I'm looking forward to those Christmas cookies right now. But the real place where sugar is very negative for longevity and health is when it's liquid. So sugar itself in like snacks or frosting or as a dessert is fine. But if you drink it, it just hits your body faster than your body can respond to. And they find this has a very negative effect on all-cause mortality. And this includes things even like kombucha, which is going to be then, it's a sweet kind of tea, fermented tea, but the sugar is still in it. You can still see it on the label. Or if you drink coffee with added sugar, that's also bad. But it doesn't include things like milk seems to be fine. We'll get to dairy in a minute, other things. But it's only when you drink it, that's even if it's orange juice or a smoothie or something, it's still sugar water. Then legumes, beans we talked about before, another great source of fiber, very healthy. You can eat quite a few servings of that and get benefit. Eggs at more than one a day becomes more negative. And red meat, which I've mentioned before, this is pork and beef. And then here we get at the bottom, now we're getting into dental habits. Now we have flossing. They can actually track that back to increasing your lifespan. The inflammation, and by the way, I'm a bit biased, and this is my father is a dentist, so, you know, maybe I'm trying to make my dad proud at last, taking some of his learnings. The bacteria and infections that you get in your mouth spread throughout in your entire body. They find the bacteria, the Streptococcus mutans, which is the cavity bacteria. If you have infections of that, they find that throughout your entire system because of the inflammation and other things. So flossing once a day is a C-tier activity that can give you additional lifespan. Okay, so let's see. I should have had this like as a guess what's on the next slide. But so now we are here at the D tier. And I think of this as the distractions tier. Like lots of people think these are the main things they should be doing, but the benefit you get here for the effort is not nearly as much as you would think. Right here we have the things that you might have thought would be on the list up at the high top, right? You've got fruits and vegetables. But honestly, most of us have listened a little bit and have some fruits and vegetables most of the time, and at about 2 servings the benefits cap out. There's just like, you don't get any more benefit out of it. And lots of people who are trying to live healthy are trying to eat fruits and vegetables all day long. I did that for a year, as we mentioned in my self-experimentation, and the thing that I found that it did for me was it had my dentist warn me about cavities for too much fruit sugar, which I haven't had since I was 15. But aside from that, it doesn't give you nearly as much benefit as some of the other healthier foods. We also have the decaffeinated coffee and tea that I mentioned. We have hot peppers. So here we now get into the spicy stuff, right? So people who eat like a whole hot spicy pepper at least once a month have longer longevity. Great. That's kind of a freebie, you know, if you like it, go ahead. Also here we have brushing your teeth. And this is one of the funny ones that I think is sort of the evidence that there's a real thing happening here, and it's not just of course healthy people brush their teeth. Because you get a longevity benefit for brushing your teeth only at night. Brushing your teeth in the morning, great, probably gives you fresh breath, 0 impact on longevity. There's something about before you go to bed that your salivary glands or something go down, you need to clean out your teeth then, and then it gives you a longer life. But a number of times a day, but earlier, none of that seems to make a difference. It's just doing it before you go to bed. So, and here we have instant coffee, which is sort of there's where it fits. Dairy is unhealthy after about a cup or 2 a day. So a cup or 2 a day is fine. After then, it then becomes linearly bad with the more you drink. Right, and then we have the no harm, no foul, no benefit. These are neutral in longevity terms. So if you're looking for some meat, poultry is not bad for you. It's not good for you like fish, but it's not bad. And refined grains. So all those fancy cakes and desserts and stuff is not shortening your life or lengthening it. It's empty calories, but you can get things from the other things. So that's a lot of information, and I mean, I live this because I'm reading this and trying to find these things and see how to put it together. But it's difficult to build the habits to do this. And I've been talking about this with my friends and acquaintances for several years as I come up with research. This is my latest thing. Did you know legumes, right? Like, but when my friend challenged me and he said, okay, look, give me a plan. I need to figure out what I need to do. So then I looked at sort of the whole thing and I said, okay, well, for the plan then, we're going to focus on the big hitters. We're going to hit the activity tier and the S tier as what you're going to get the most benefit for your time for. And one of the things that is not well known is that actually the dosage for this, the optimal dose, is not as much as you think. And that's one of the things that I love. When you get into the real details of the numbers, you can also see in the charts of like, okay, you ate 20 grams of nuts, it gave you a huge benefit. You ate 40 grams, you got nothing more for it. And we see this in many of the other things as well. For instance, in the aerobic training, aerobic exercise has a similar kind of thing, where if you're doing aerobic exercise every week, massive benefit of about 35% reduction in all-cause mortality. If you're doing it twice a week, also about a 35% reduction in all-cause mortality. There's no increase on it. Right? So, okay, do it once a week. So I put these together in a plan and was working with my friend on them. And then some of my other friends said, hey, how come he gets a plan? Like, we would like to do this too. So I'm like, okay. So I opened it up then. It had about 20 of my friends signed up and said, okay, well, we'll do this together. So I put it together as a year-long plan. And so for each of it's 4 quarter-long plans, quarter-long activities to live a long and a healthy life, right? So this became then the Unaging Challenge 2025, which I'm launching next year on January 6th. It's free. I think this kind of information is useful, and all I have to do is make a Google spreadsheet, which Google gives me for free, so I'll pass that on. But I've been very heartened to do this with my friends and to work through this together, because I've been talking about exercise and this is a great idea for years. And honestly, they hadn't done much, right? But when I put it as a spreadsheet, I said, okay, we're all going to do this together as a challenge. You can see how everyone else is doing. They can see what you're doing. All of a sudden, the participation went much higher. And right, like all of a sudden it became real. Is like, okay, we're doing this as a challenge. And the whole idea behind it is we're going to do it for 12 weeks, right? We'll do it for 12 weeks, and I'll put together the structure for it so you get the best dosage out of it, you get the build of it, and you decide how to hit the benchmarks. So as a spoiler, for the first 12 weeks, it focuses on high-intensity interval training, which you have to get your heart rate up to about 90%. It's really hard effort. But one of the nice things about it is that 90% is based off of your heart rate. It's relative for wherever you start at. For the people who are not fit, they just need to do whatever would take them up to 90%. And for the people who are fit, they of course have to work harder, but it's still 90%. Like maximum effort, whatever your effort is at, that's maximum for you. So I have had people who had done no training at all, came into the program, and they get the most benefit because they have a lot of room to go. And I've also had people who are quite trained, doing half marathons, another thing, who also did the program, and they also found benefit of it because they learned sort of the optimum dose and maybe did a bit of things they didn't know. So also the other part of it is that people are free to choose whatever it is that you want to do. So one of my good friends was willing to do the challenge. He said, I hate running. I'm not running. No, I'm like, so he's instead doing jumping jacks in his house to get to the maximum heart rate. So it's all open to you. Some people are bicycling. Some people are using the elliptical machine in the gym. It's all up to you for kind of what you feel would do that. And all I have to do is put a spreadsheet, and you put there what you did, like how it went for you and also what your metrics are. So one of the other requirements that I've asked people to do is to get some kind of a smartwatch or something that tracks the heart rate so that they can then see how they're progressing or how it's going. Right, so it started, right now we've already done the cardio training, and also we've done strength training, which was the second challenge. And here we have the data. This is week 1, session 1, week 2, session 2, etc. And this is about the 20 people. And it's kind of hard to process, so we'll put a little bit of form behind it. So this is the beginner gains for the win. This is how much strength they gained. So it's a very simple calculation, basically just based off of how much capacity they had. And the people who were the beginners, untrained, had the most improvement, nearly twice as much over the period. I mean, a lot of that is just getting used to it, right? They haven't done the weights before. But people, again, were able to adapt this to what they had available. Some people did this at a home gym. Some people found they had a great gym down the street and fell in love with it, and they go there all the time now. But it's able to be done with whatever you have and whatever your level is at. And for those of us who are trained, the gains were not quite as great, but still I was able to gain 10%, and that seemed to be fairly typical for the people who were already doing weightlifting, just from going through a different structure and a different maybe routine than people were used to. Right, so let's come back to the beginning of it. Well, actually, no, let's talk about this is what we achieved. So over the 12 weeks, in total, between the 20 people, and adding up all their lifts of twice a week and every single lift that they did, the total weight was 1.5 million kilograms of weight lifted, which happens to be the weight of a Boeing 747 fully loaded. Right, so this is effectively how much as a team we lifted over the 12 weeks. But that's the team. To put a face to it, this is Blaine, the person who was with me and asked me, look, I'm getting winded just climbing a flight of stairs. I need a program for this. And then after working with Blaine, then my other friends said, okay, look, we want to do this as well. So this is the early adopters, about 20 people or so, that came together to do this. So I'm very excited to say that already for the 2025 challenge, we have 100 people who are registered. So we have 6 separate teams with about 10 to 20 people on each team. We'll be sharing a spreadsheet for them. And there will be good data coming out of this. I'll find out sort of like more what benefits for people and see how they do it. And also I plan to track more of it across the entire period. So my studies say that this is the minimum dose, but one of the things I'll get to test is during the program to see whether that's really true. Like, were people able to maintain the benefits they got in the earlier phases, say during the cardio kickoff, when they're doing a reduced amount of cardio because they're now focusing on strength training as the primary. So it's an exciting effort. And here's the QR codes are all the rage. So I have a QR code here. For signing up if you're interested in trying a different challenge for 2025. Also, you can just go to unaging.com, my website, and take a look at it there. I have a lot of reading about all these things about coffee and sugar and everything else that you might want to know about. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll join us for 2025. Okay.
All right, so we got to do the Q&A. Sorry, I'm going to do it from, I got to sit down here because I got to manage all the mics. What number is that, Melvin? Number 3. Thank you.
Is this working?
Yes.
Yes.
I hear you.
Yes, it is. Well, thanks for the talk. So since you spend like so much time like going through such a huge amount of information, I'm kind of curious as to whether you found something like quite curious and unintuitive. Say you get this substance or you eat this whatever, 1 gram is like the most amazing thing you get, and then you get actually negative effects. So can you actually reverse the effects of some good stuff like in small quantities? And let's say, of course, that's true for most of the things you probably listed, but is there one thing that you thought, that's surprising?
Yeah, the biggest thing that jumped out for me for having not like a U of benefits, right, where you get a reduction and then it kind of peaks up, but actually I call it a V for weightlifting, strength training. So the optimal amount for longevity of weightlifting, strength training, is 1 hour total time per week. That's it. So if you talk about like someone who Brian Johnson who lists an hour every day, Yeah, so it's very surprising. So there's cardiovascular issues and other things that happen. And if you're lifting more than 2.5 hours total time in the week, you now have a longevity the same as if you'd never gone to the gym in the first place. So I lose a lot of people when I'm talking to the gym, people who love the gym. I grew to like the gym as well. They're just like, okay, now I'm not listening to you, right? It is one of the things that I say, if you're trying to build things, if you're going to a competition or something, then absolutely, you should be going to the gym every day of the week. But if you look at it in the long term, is that a good habit to do forever? Maybe you don't need to. Yeah, good question. Thanks. Yes.
So I have a question about the confounds in your data. So this is actually, it's nerd night, guys. Come on. All right. So you're talking about walking and aerobic exercise. A lot of the people who are doing that walking and aerobic exercise are the ones who are getting those 12,000 steps in. Mm-hmm. So, most of, many of the people I know who get their 12,000 steps aren't getting it by just walking around. They're getting the 12,000 steps by running, by doing other activities, and that get caught by their Fitbits or whatever else they're using. Mm-hmm. So how are you teasing that out of the data?
The aerobic exercise doesn't count. Doesn't count. Like the study that but how are you counting it? So the study that I used as the reference for that one, they're using accelerometers to count the steps. And if the accelerometer is going at a pace that would be considered medium or vigorous physical activity, it's not counted towards the step count. So they did it algorithmically with the measurement device to say, there's a difference between when you're running and when you're walking, and they discounted all of those because I already knew from before that aerobic exercise gives you no benefit after the first 20 minutes or so a week. And so I was very concerned with this question of okay. And so it's been one of the challenges with my early adopters is to say, okay, you need to walk. The challenge is to walk 12,000 steps a day, and running steps don't count. Has to be walking in order to get the full benefit of it. So it is definitely something that I've thought a lot about it, and it appears to be very important that you make the distinction. Thanks for the question. I think the person on the mics gets the next question.
Number one. What's number one doing in the mix now?
Test. Okay, it's on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for an interesting talk. I think nowadays, managing fitness can feel like a full-time job. Sleep this much, exercise this much. Mm-hmm. How do you manage for stress? You're telling these people you've got to walk 12,000 steps a day, you've got to run this much, you've got to work out this much while having a life and kids. And I think stress is a big factor in decreasing, I think.
Yes.
How do you manage for that? And how, what if someone's I can only walk night? Yeah. How do you manage that in terms of your study?
So the elevator pitch, or the short summary of the goal, is 90 minutes weekly exercise, 20 extra years of expected life. Okay, so that's labeled out of the front, 90 minutes of exercise. And as I said, some of it we go into a build phase so that you get used to it, you build the habit of it, you get the benefits of it, you're yeah, okay, this is great. And then we drop it down. So in the first challenge for the first 12 weeks, we're doing the 90 minutes is purely high-intensity interval training, right? And then you get used to that. You kind of see how that goes. By the end of 12 weeks, maximum effort still sucks. But you know how to do it, and you're used to it. But then after that, for the rest of the entire program, you only do the high-intensity interval training for one period of 30 minutes a week, as now we move the 2 of those sessions over to the strength training to build on that. So at any given time, you're only doing 90 minutes total time a week. And honestly, by the end of it, you could be doing just 60 minutes. But the walking is just a chunk. I have a walking desk. That's how I do that personally. But yeah. But it's definitely, the entire program is designed to be something that can be fit in with other things. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
I wonder if you have any idea about why walking is so beneficial. I mean, aerobic exercise or HIIT may increase your VO2 max, or your strength training may be good for balance or reduced falls, things like that. So why exactly would walking be so beneficial, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm a mathematician, not a doctor. So that's why I like the all-cause mortality, because then I can just close my eyes to the mechanisms and look, did they die early or not? So I'm kind of blind to that. I've seen some interesting ideas to say that one is like your legs are like a secondary heart. That like basically every time you move your calves, you're basically getting the blood flow. This is the hardest place to get your blood to return to the heart from. And so one of the theories behind that, and then of course the program, they say, okay, so if you sit at your desk and you do this day, you'll live longer, which go for the whole exercise. The other part of it, and this is something that I've just recently been exploring, is that it seems like actually sunlight could be a big factor out of that too. It could account for maybe a third or something of the overall benefit. It's not enough to account for all of it, but that could be one of the other beneficial parts of it. Except when it's cloudy or raining, yes. Just hold on a second. So those are the things that I can think of for it. The other part is, like, I started out trying to look at whether it was bad to be sitting too much during the day. And that has this they're trying to say that if you sit for 12 hours like at your job, because many people have jobs where you sit for a long period, that's totally fine. But if you sit for 14 hours a day, all of a sudden it's bad. And I'm just trying to think of, like, what would be the mechanism that just does nothing for 12 hours, then at 14 goes bad. I'm like, no, what's really happening is if you're sitting for like 14 or 16 hours a day, you're not walking at all, right? So that's when I started to focus on the walking, is it just seems to be that keeps you from sitting all day, is one of the other explanations that I came up for it. Okay, thanks for the question. You got the mark. Okay. Trumped. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Okay, so everything up here is an intervention. It's basically something, a habit that you can change personally. It's something you can take personal responsibility for.
Yes.
And all these things are great. They're fantastic. They're things that you should do. We're lucky to live in Tokyo, where walking is the norm, for example. Have you done any work or looked into environmental factors, things that as individuals we can't change necessarily, like, say, air pollution or chronic disease caused by, say, infectious disease, that sort of thing, and their effect on mortality, things that we could affect as a society, the use of, I don't know, microplastics or pesticides, and how those also factor into this?
I've had quite a bit of thought about those things as well. And my off-the-cuff response is I think some of them are overrated, like the microplastics things. I've not been impressed by the studies on it. But sometimes it is what I think limits it. Like, one of my theories for why you don't get more benefit from aerobic exercise is because of the air pollution you have to breathe to get it, right? So if you're doing aerobic exercise, you take about 6 times as much oxygen in, you breathe as much as you would if you're walking, which could be, and according to the WHO standards, like, anyone who lives anywhere near a city is basically, is breathing air that the World Health Organization says is unhealthy. Like, you have to be like in the forest of the Amazon or something to not be. And so that's one place where I think that comes up. The second thing is, when I talked about the limited benefits of fruits and vegetables, I've seen some research that said that that's because if you eat too much fruits and vegetables, you start to get too much pesticides with them. Right? And so you have then an exponential effect that's coming in that causes increased cancer. And that can be solved by getting organics, but for those of us who live in Tokyo, it's not that easy. So it does come in a few places. I see it oftentimes as a limit to the benefit you can get to something, because then eventually the pollution effects can become more strong. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, here.
Hi.
So why is strength gain an acceptable pseudo metric that you're looking at in your program? And related to that, why wouldn't exogenous creatine or protein be an acceptable improvement to the strength gain, and hence an improvement to all-cause mortality, if it is an acceptable metric?
Oh, they are, both of them. I recommend creatine and protein during the strength training. That's probably where my 10% came from, was probably the creatine. Creatine is a very safe, it's a very cheap supplement you can use that will increase your strength and endurance when you're doing strength training. And I do recommend it. It's well documented, been around for decades, and does help you to lift more. The reason that I choose the strength as the metric for many of these things is because it's difficult to find a metric that actually shows you the benefit of it. But one is it's fun. So you can see number go up. That it's like you see the results of the training that you go through. As I said, especially for the people who are new to it, to see an 80% gain. And it's funny because it's a straight number that is based off of the total amount of weight that you lifted. And so the people in the test were starting to game the system, right? They're starting to do leg press, which is not the best exercise, but you can move the most weight with it. So there is a certain amount of gameplay for that, but there's not another metric that I know of that would represent the health gains of it. It's kind of like walking in that we know that will extend your life, and that continued strength training will maintain your strength and throughout your years. It's the number one. An 80-year-old who lifts weight can be stronger than like a 20-year-old who doesn't get off the couch. So it's definitely, the training is sufficient, so then the strength and how much you can lift is a fun way to quantify.
Okay, thank you for your very interesting talk. So the data that you showed was quite interesting, like coming from the protein question. The natural sources of protein that you mentioned, like red meat's bad, we kind of all know it, but like legumes is like slightly bad, it's like in C tier, I guess?
Legumes was C tier, yes.
Yeah, and like eggs are bad, poultry is neutral, so like all the natural source of protein, like they have like
fish.
hardly, except fish, like, but.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't consider because I don't eat.
Okay, well then, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, they don't even consider a meat here, so it's fun for me. So, like, why do you think like it's like kind of like hinting toward like bit of exercise and more sedentary lifestyle? It's like kind of mix of two. So, do you think that like the key for longevity is like you don't go like full on ham towards like muscle building? It's more like towards like endurance plus a bit of sedentary lifestyle. It's just kind of mix of two, but with the like kind of like more how can I say, more lenient diet, like do not like consume too much of proteins.
Yes, I would. I mean, the proteins, there's something called the protein leverage, which is a specific factor that talks about if you don't get enough protein in your diet, it increases your hunger quite significantly. And this is what people who are on a vegan diet oftentimes will struggle through, is that it's difficult for them to get a really high protein source, and so they want more protein. So I am, I don't know, pro-protein, I guess, but
no, like,
yeah.
it's an important part.
Yes, it is an overall important part. And the longevity studies definitely show that if you're even if it's muscle, if you're over-muscled, it doesn't add extra life. It's one of the things that they've shown doesn't add as much life as you would if more of a lean build. So I would agree with that. Like, walking is going to get you more over the long period than, say, extensive weightlifting, and also for the running as well, like the certain dose. And a lot of it is just about maintaining and keeping over the long period as opposed to building up a short period and then kind of giving up the habit.
Okay, thank you.
Last question is the fellow with the blue with the beard. You got it?
You can talk to me later.
C signals are
Okay.
Hi. So I have a pretty extreme question, but where is the ethical limit in prolonging lifespans, considering how research is conducted and how it benefits society? I mean, Japan has a famously aging population and wouldn't necessarily benefit. And especially today, I mean, technology like CRISPR, which is a method of direct gene alteration, is being worked on. So how would you draw the line between a healthy life and, as mentioned before, becoming the supervillain in a Marvel comic?
Wow, we went supervillain pretty fast there. So, so for the good news or the bad news is that honestly, spoiler is that no one really makes it past 100 almost. Like if you make it to 110, like you're in the Wikipedia right there. So with all of these things, unfortunately, I have in my calculations for longevity for the actuarial table, when I first did it, I kind of added up all the things, then I did everything, and then it said I was going to live to 200 years old. And I'm not going to live to 200 years old unless someone invents some kind of a new technology. So I do think it's this is an attempt to live long enough till they get the supervillain serum that will enable us to live longer. But in the more philosophical question that you point out of like, is it a good thing if we live too long? I had this argument with my mother all the time. She's like, we got too many people already. I'm ready to die. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. But I think that our greatest strength actually is the brain power. And even if we think that, like, the Malthusian disaster, we have too many people, we won't be able to survive, has always been countered by new inventions that were made by the brains that were alive at the time. So I think that if we continue to expand lifespan, we'll continue to expand the opportunities. So I think it's a net positive if people live longer as opposed to a villainous action.
Thank you. Sorry, just juggling the mics. Which one am I on now?
All right, so. No, I'm on number 2.
Okay, can I have the mic for a moment?
Oh, you want the mic from? All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. It's on. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Before we finish, before Andrew wraps things up, speaking of a long life, I just want to remind everyone, this is Andrew's birthday today.
Yay!
We can sing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andrew. Happy birthday to you.
And the people on the live stream only heard Crissman sing.
I know. I was a little nervous about that.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Let me now wrap this up. I got a couple. I need you to hit some buttons. First of all, Crissman, thank you so much. Let's just give Crissman another round of applause. Thank you so much. So just letting this thing open. I'm not getting a lot of volume out of this. Hold on. Yeah, I know, but
the live streamers.
Live stream people. Hello. Okay, yeah. All right. I just had to, I'll take the mask off and talk right into the mic so the next person who uses it gets a disease. Right. Let's hit the next slide. So I just want to thank.
Hey, get ready!
I want to thank everybody.
Thing is
New version of this. Another version of the song we started with.
2, 1, let's
turn it down a little bit.
It's Friday. It's
I just want to
that
thank.
time of the month.
I want to thank Andrew,
We get
Bruce, Todd,
together and
the
take
man who sells the
plunge
beakers and
into
books the speakers.
science. Or
I want to
maybe
thank
some
Rio, who's
art,
not here,
or
who
maybe
makes
some
sure all our
weird
publicity
hobby
gets
close
done.
to somebody's heart.
I want to
It's
thank.
Nerd Night. Get your nerd on.
All generated by an algorithm. It's hard to believe. Not the lyrics. I want to thank Melvin, who operates our camera, and it really helps with setup and take down Coco, who is unfortunately sick and not here tonight, but is usually here helping us as well. Selena, who is on door filming me at the moment for some reason. That's creepy. You're not being creepy at all. Daria, who had to leave early but was operating our soundboard, so I didn't have to run back and forth for the first half of the show. And I want to thank our venue, Ryosan Park Lounge, for hosting us. And I want to thank all of you for being here. See you in February. Good night.
If you want to buy a beaker, it's Melvin, our AirSats cameraman. If you're watching on live stream, you should be a Melvin stan. It's Coco, making sure things stay on track when all the shit goes down. She's always got our backs. It's Selena, she's the first person you see. Everybody loves her, right? It's not just me. It's Daria, make sure you can hear us. Do you hear us, fools? It's Andrew. He's Nerd Night, Tokyo's OG. He's here to pull his hair out, and sometimes he MCs. It's Nerd Night. Get your nerd on in Tokyo. Keep your shirt on. Sugamo. We'll make you think now. Park lounge. Buy a drink now. It's Nerd Night. Get your nerd on in Tokyo. Keep your shirt on. Sugamo. We'll make you think now. Park lounge. Buy a drink now. 3, 2, 1. Let's go!
Okay.